So Cardiff is the capital of Wales, there's no shocker there, but it hasn't always been the capital of Wales, and you might think that I'm going to go back to some forgotten century, but you'd be wrong because Cardiff only became the capital of Wales in the 1950s, and before that, there was no capital. So a little backstory, before the English invaded in the 13th century, there wasn't really a unified Wales. Well, the various states and principalities did unite briefly in the 11th century, but there was no designated capital then, and when the Welsh rose up in the 15th century, there wasn't a set place for their parliament. Well, in the 15th century, two very small towns were chosen to hold court very briefly, and what's important there is that they were both in the north. But anyway, by the 18th and 19th century, many of Wales's former great towns had largely diminished. For instance, St David's is sort of Wales's ecclesiastical centre, and in the Tudor period it was made a city, but by the 19th century it was described as a small town in a ruinous state, and now only has a few thousand people and is Britain's smallest city. But before I go on to the contenders, I should say that having one capital city, or in fact any capital city, isn't exactly necessary, and it's sometimes quite complicated. For instance, South Africa has split a lot of the powers between three cities, Pretoria, Cape Town and Bloemfontein, and other nations like Ivory Coast and Burma have moved their capital cities but not many of the government buildings. But Wales is sort of unique because it didn't have a Supreme Court, Parliament building or anything like that, so there was no clear choice as to which city should be chosen as its new capital, but here are the options. Cardiff, where I am now, of course won out, but it only became Wales's largest city in the 1870s thanks to immigrants arriving from England and Ireland. It was given city status in the early 20th century, and the National Museum of Wales was built there shortly afterwards. An early poll on the capital city of Wales, 76 out of 160 people said that Cardiff should become the capital city, but this was carried out in a South Wales paper, something that I'll get onto in a little bit. That poll, by the way, was carried out in 1924, but in 1955, The Guardian said that Cardiff had a cosmopolitan air, it was the home of Welsh rugby, and most English people had accepted it as the capital city of Wales, but this also isn't exactly true. Otherwise, Swansea was also a major industrial hub, but this was only given city status in the 1960s. And there was Merthyr Tydfil, which was once Wales's largest city, but had fallen into decline in the late 19th century. And in a film produced about Britain in World War II, an American is told by an Englishman that the capital of Wales is Aberystwyth, and many people did back this to be the capital city. After all, here in Cardiff, not many people spoke Welsh, so Aberystwyth was seen to be the sort of cultural capital of Wales, or at least the Welsh language, and the National Library was built there. Plus, it lies in the centre of Wales, and this is somewhat important because infrastructure between North and South Wales is pretty poor. For instance, if you wanted to travel from Cardiff to, let's say, Bangor, you'd more than likely, even today, have to go through Shrewsbury in England, so at least Aberystwyth lies in the centre. And before I go on, I should say that Wrexham, Bangor, Aberystwyth and Cardiff all had universities in the late 19th century. But Cardiff's chief rival was Carnarvon in North Wales. This was a much more historic city. For instance, Edward II was born there in the early 14th century in the grand newly built castle. And although it had a smaller population, the vast majority of them could speak Welsh, so it was seen to be a historical and cultural capital of Wales. However, in the whole capital city debate, Cardiff won out and became the capital city in the 1950s.